Okay, we are rolling.
Joined now by TSN hockey analyst, former Vancouver Canuck, Mr. Frank Corrado. How we doing?
I'm great, guys. I can't tell you how nice it is to come on your show and talk about the Vancouver Canucks being a good team, players near the top of the stats page. We got defensemen in the running for not only the Norris, but the Art Ross and the Hart. Like, what a difference. What a difference a year makes. Like, I can't wait to talk to you guys every week now.
Wow. We're bored by it, actually. It's gone on for weeks now.
Sick of winning.
Yeah.
Tired of winning. No. First of all, we know you love your defensemen, and we're going to get to some of them here in this conversation. But secondly, Corrado, I mean, you've just been 1 year with us, like 6 months of misery. Like Blake and I, it's been like a decade. Honestly,
Trapped in this hole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We felt like we were in Groundhog Day doing the same show over and over for 6-7 years. But
you know what's funny? I never listened to talk radio in Vancouver because I never owned a vehicle when I played for the Canucks. I would always just walk to the rink, and I was never really there long enough to justify purchasing a car. So I would only hear like the snippets that people would tweet out, you know, during those times, and you happen to see them as much as you're not looking for them. But every once in a while, I get in a car with my buddy Slav, as you guys know, and you know, he'd have on the radio station and hear what you guys are saying. It was always a treat. It was always a treat to get those little snippets every once in a while.
Hey, we were very kind to prospect Frank.
I know. I'm not saying, it's just, you know what I mean? When you don't hear it, and then you see it, and then you finally hear it, you're like, oh, there they are. There's my guys.
So yesterday, look, Colorado and Vancouver tonight, Makar versus Hughes. Yesterday, we did a poll question on can Hughes surpass Makar as the best defenseman in the game. I'd like your take there, but also a little compare and contrast here, Frankie. They're two exceptional defensemen. You know, what does Makar do differently than Hughes to get to that level?
Ooh. Okay, so first of all, both incredible.
Or what doesn't he do? Perhaps
I know.
Is a better question.
I know. For me, Cale Makar would have to really fall off a cliff for Quinn Hughes to be able to overtake him as the king daddy in the NHL as far as defenseman goes. Like when I watch Cale Makar, I see a guy that is so powerful and so strong. He similar to McKinnon in the way he skates, where he just powers through on the ice. Hughes has got that like light-footed gracefulness to his step. And so I think that's where they're a little bit different. Makar's a little more overpowering. Hughes is a little more that like evasive kind of finesse, like float like a butterfly kind of player. But Makar's playing great. And I think right now, because Hughes is playing in a Canadian market and it's getting a lot of play, and of course he's atop the NHL in a lot of categories as far as D-man goes, like it's really impressive. Makar is right there though. And I feel like not a lot of people are talking about it. The thing that's ultimately going to separate both those guys when we have the head-to-head comparison is that Makar has won a Stanley Cup, and Quinn Hughes has a long way to go with his team in order to get to that point. So there's that at play as well. I mean, playoff success, and as we know, Cale Makar was a monster when they went and won the Stanley Cup. That's gonna go a long way when it comes to comparing these two guys, whether it's right or wrong. But that's the way we look at a lot of players. And Cale Makar has been a beast for a long time. Quinn Hughes, I think he's been a great player. He's really coming into his own this year. A lot of people are wondering, is he going to come back down to earth? Like, what if this is what he is? Like, what if he's just like a top 3 defenseman in the NHL and he's worked his way up to this point? And that's fine. But like, if you're asking me, like, who am I taking tomorrow? If I'm picking a team, I'm still taking Cale Makar. But if I'm picking second overall, I'm pretty damn happy I got Quinn Hughes.
He used to make great plays in games. He's never controlled games, which is what he's doing this year. That's the big difference.
Well, and the threat of the shot and Hughes' goal scorer, that he's already tied the career high of 8 goals, Frankie.
Yeah. Well, and like it's an emphasis on shooting more. You can see, like, you know, I'll scroll through his video clips just to see what he's doing. I'm like, oh, there's a shot that I didn't expect him to take. It's like outside the dots, but he's got a one-timer. And I think he's doing a really good job of understanding when to kind of push himself into the middle of the ice and make a fake and get himself into a prime scoring position. But he's also recognizing when it's like you got to pull the trigger really quickly and get it off your stick, because you might have 2 guys at net front that can battle for something, or you might have a high tip option, which he finds a lot. So, and I think if you go into a summer as a player with one thing to focus on, and you can really hammer away at that one thing, you can come back into the season and show that you've improved in that. You go into a summer as a player and you're like, yeah, I got like 3 things I really need to work on here. There's like, there's a certain movement I need to work on as far as skating goes. There's a little thought process I need to have as far as how I process the game that I need to kind of work on and get better at, and the shot. It's like, it's hard to really focus on 3 things and see the improvement year after year. But you take one thing, like for me, Quinn Hughes, like the shot was a big deal for him, and now he's got a lot more confidence taking the one-timer on the power play, and that's opening up space for him because now people have to respect the shot at 5-on-5, respect it on the power play, and if you want to overplay him, which will happen from time to time, he just spins off you. Like he just kind of like he'll throw a little head fake, he'll spin off you, and then he gets himself in a good position. So his recognition of when to kind of pull the trigger quickly and when to add a little bit of that flair that he has and can do so well has been really impressive this year.
Leads the team in shots on goal. To me, it's made all the more impressive this season too because of the contemporaries that he has to go up against in terms of comparison, like a Cale Makar. And it's underscored in this TSN top 50 players under the age of 25 and
24.
Well, so Quinn is 24 and he's on the list. So,
okay.
Yeah, confusing. But yeah, anyhow.
24 and under.
Let's 24 and under. Yeah. I mean, on this list,
thanks, Frank.
Quinn Hughes at 2, Rasmus Dahlin at 5, Seider at 6, Sanderson at 7, Owen Power at 9, Dobson at 11, Luke Hughes at 13. I mean, it's unbelievable. With all due respect to guys like Hedman and Yossi, who remain in the league and pretty darn effective, the top defensemen in the league are all under the age of 25.
Yeah, listen, it's like a golden era for defensemen right now. And I kind of think back to when I came into the league or was coming up. You could see this wave of guys that were kind of going to follow in the footsteps of Drew Doughty and Alex Pietrangelo. Like you could see that the game was headed that way, but we were still kind of being coached a little bit on the conservative side of things, where it was like, get the puck out of the D-man's hands and just get it up to the forwards. Like there was still a lot of emphasis on that. Like you'd hear the term push the pace a lot, and push the pace meant like, we're not coming back. Like everything's got to go north, north, north. And I think now with the way guys, with the way young defensemen are coming up, it's almost like teams are okay with these guys hanging on to the puck a little bit longer because they know they're very sure of what they can do with it. And you're seeing a lot of like attack and 5-man units and hit the speed underneath when your forwards really push up the ice. Like it's opening up these pockets of ice. And the modern day defenseman who skates really well, who can handle the puck really well, who wants to get involved in the play in the offensive zone, these kinds of guys are having a field day. And like the game was headed in this direction, and it's taken a little while, but we finally got here. The thing that's really going to cement it is when a blue line wins the Stanley Cup with a number of guys like this. And we don't really have the talk about the big, bulky, like burly defenseman, which I think is still prominent when it comes playoff time. And I think the Vegas Golden Knights are a great example of why that was so effective for them. So there still is that. There's still a lot of value in that. But if your team has one of these guys, like all those guys you just mentioned, if your team has one of those guys, you're pretty happy with your blue line and your number one guy. As far as Quinn Hughes on that list, like there's a lot of guys that have some name value there. Like I think of Dahlin. Did you say Heiskanen, or is he a little older?
He's older. Not be on that. He's 25. Yeah,
he's too old, but I kind of put him in that category of guys as well. And it's like Hughes, if you watch Quinn Hughes play and you watch those guys play, like he's not only right there with them, he's better than some of them. Like he's crisp, he's efficient, he's so clean, and his defensive game has come a long way. And I think it's pretty simple for him. He skates well enough that he doesn't really let guys get on the wrong side of him as much as he maybe did in the past. And that's part of like the maturity process as a player. But man, he's been really, really impressive this year.
Before we move on here, one thing I am seeing from Quinn Hughes is that just by virtue of his ice time and how much the puck is on his stick, he is going to make louder mistakes. Like you just are. When you play 28 minutes a game and you have the puck on your stick, you're going to make some mistakes. They often trust him to be the last guy up, lugging the puck, and he's going to overhandle it at times. How do you think coaches and fans will react to that? Because he's going to be great until he's not.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, he's going to make a loud mistake.
Listen, if it's every once in a while, it's not a big deal. And that's the reality of being a puck moving defenseman and having the puck on your stick that much. Like when you make a mistake, it has the opportunity to be magnified. But I'm not worried about that, because if he goes out there and he makes 10 great plays in a row, and then there's one that's like, oh, that resulted in a shot on net and your goalie bailed you out, and there's one every other game that might result in a goal against, you got to take the good with the bad, man. You can't nitpick that kind of stuff and say, hey, we really want you. And this is a cliche, and I don't know if anyone says this to Quinn Hughes, and I don't know if he puts himself in this position, but like, hey, we really want you to simplify your game. Like, what are you going to tell Quinn Hughes to simplify?
Please,
right?
The guy's
one of the most dynamic players in the game, and you're seeing the results. So you can live with, as long as the attention to detail is there and the effort is there. I'll give you an example. And I hate to carve the kid, but like that Evan Bouchard in Edmonton, he's great offensively, but he almost doesn't do himself many favors because he makes it look so like lackadaisical defensively, and it's easy to get on a guy like that. And I think, like, I know he's going through the injury trouble here now in Toronto. Like John Klingberg has that same kind of optic look where it's like, it's too casual defensively. So I know the injury now, so we got to give him a little bit of leeway there. Like I think about my old teammate, Jake Gardner, where he was a guy who had the puck on his stick a lot, and he really tried to make plays. And a lot of the times he made a lot of great plays. But if it looked casual when it went awry and coming back to the net, that's when people will kind of say like, it doesn't, you're messing up too much. Like you got to keep it simple. And it's like, okay, if Quinn Hughes doesn't have that casual look to his game, everything he does, it looks like he's very engaged and very focused on it. So I think you just got to learn to take the good with the bad. And when I say bad, like from what I've seen this year, there's next to nothing bad about it. It's not something that happens on a semi-regular basis.
No defenseman has won the Hart since Chris Pronger in 2000. Only one defenseman has won the Art Ross, Bobby Orr, going back to 75. Is it possible?
I suppose anything is possible, but I would say rather unlikely at this point, especially when it comes to the Art Ross. There's just too many. Like when I was doing my top 50 list this year, I went heavier on forwards because I just thought there were so many guys that could challenge for 90, 100 points. And I felt like the list, like I was making my list and I'm like, man, that's another guy that could have 95 points. That's a guy that can have 100 points. So I do believe at some point he's gonna have to cool off. It's just, and then there's always like, hey, tweak the groin, or, like, not that we want that kind of stuff to happen, but those are the realities of life in the NHL. As far as the Hart goes, that's a more compelling one for me. Because if he were to keep himself near the top of the scoring race, and obviously he would have to be the highest scoring defenseman in the league, which Cale Makar is going to give him a good run for his money there. And the Vancouver Canucks finish, I don't know, like second in the Pacific. That's a pretty compelling case for me. And if he's the one leading the charge in that respect, I would say that one is more attainable than the Art Ross. I don't know. Let me know what you think, but I feel like there's the team aspect. Like there's the driving of the team aspect narrative that you can really get behind on.
It's
that
subjective too.
It's such a narrow, isolated lane, the Art Ross, whereas you're quite right. The Hart Trophy has a little more texture, has a little more narrative to it. And I do think it's more likely you'll see a defenseman win the Hart than win an Art Ross. I mean, history has proven that as well. Hey, let me ask you this. Speaking about Hughes versus Makar tonight, when you played with Sid, did he get, some extra grit between his teeth when it was Ovi on the other side, or it was young Connor McDavid, or it was his fellow Haligonian Nathan McKinnon? Like when there was a superstar on the other side of the ice, did Sidney bear down a little a little more than your typical NHL game?
He was always like very focused before the game, and he's such a superstitious guy. But I remember we played a game in Edmonton in the new building there. I don't know if it was a Hockey Night in Canada game, but regardless, it's Crosby versus McDavid. It's in Edmonton. It's a big deal. You could tell there was a little something there where he wanted to come out on top in that game. And I believe we won that game in overtime. I can't remember. He might have factored in on that. But regardless, when there's like when he played against Canadian market teams and the spotlight was on, you could see there was a little extra motivation for him there. And he always, like, one thing I'll say about Sid, he goes about everything in the right way. He was the most impressive hockey player that I ever got to see, like up close and personal like that, whether it was practices, games. So like him kind of dialing in a little bit more, I think the guys around the room really noticed that. And there was almost like a little bit of like, this is an important game for our team, just like every game is, but it's also an important game for Sid. So, and I feel like a lot of guys really like carried that with them. I don't think I ever played a game with Pittsburgh versus the Capitals. I would have been around or a healthy scratch for a few of those games at least. But playing Edmonton, you could definitely see that was something on his radar.
Well, and also, he was quite honest as a young player, as a teenager, that his favorite team was Montreal growing up. And boy, every time he went to the Bell Center, remember that backhand in the water bottle going up to the rafters? You could tell he wanted to put on a show in the Cathedral of Hockey. Ethan Bear is skating, getting ready for a return here. I'd like your evaluation in terms of how much he would help the Canucks right now, particularly given the injury to Carson Soucy.
Yeah, listen, it'll be tough for him because he didn't get a training camp, and he's obviously joining the team as things have progressed here. The biggest challenge he's going to face is that if you join a team at training camp, you're all going through the paces together. So everyone that was working on their conditioning and tightening things up, like you're all going through it together. Everyone's gone through that process, and he's been rehabbing. And the difficult part is now you're just trying to get back to even par, essentially, while everyone's kind of like made gains here as the season has gone on. So there's that. And like the way the league just moves at a rate where it's like, things tighten up structurally. Like, look at the San Jose Sharks. They were terrible to start the season, and now they were kind of like, they're a tougher out.
Just a bad team. Just a bad team.
They're just a bad team, but at least you can see like they're a little more on the same page. So there's that example as well. But there is something to be said for a guy like, rejuvenated, fresh start here, although it's like his old team, but he still would have like a fresh start with the new season and all that kind of stuff. And maybe he doesn't have the wear and tear of the rigors of an early part of the regular season. So there's something to be said there. But as far as like how he could fit in on the blue line, if you could get Ethan Bear playing to Ethan Bear's level pretty quickly, that would help the blue line. I mean that in no disrespect to Noah Juleson, but he would be an upgrade over Noah Juleson, and he would help the team. And it's a guy that's maybe a little more versatile. You could trust him in a few more situations. I liked Ethan Bear's game when he was playing for the Canucks, and like anything, when the team's not very good, certain players stick out and struggle in ways, and maybe they're not used in the best way. But the way the blue line is structured now, you could probably slide him into a situation where he's not playing on the top pair. He doesn't have to be relied upon that much. He can play, 13, 14 minutes and have a pretty quiet night and say, yeah, he was good. Like he moved the puck pretty well. It never looked like he was really in danger, and there was no big gaps in his game. So I think the situation could lend itself to somewhat of a softer landing if he were to join the team and start playing games.
Conditioning stints help. 3 games in the A. Does that help?
I would I think a conditioning stint helps. It depends the purpose of it. I always had to do the stupidest conditioning stint when I was with the Leafs, where I'd be healthy scratched for like 2 months in a row. And Lou would come up to me and go, we're going to send you on a 2-week conditioning stint to the Marlies. They got 7 games in 14 days. We saw this on the calendar, and we thought this was going to be the perfect situation for you. I was like, oh, great. At the time, I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to play 7 games in 14 days. This is awesome. Then I realized I'm playing 7 games in 14 days, and I haven't played in 2 months. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why am I playing a 3-3 when I haven't played in 2 months? This is so dumb. I played like crap. And then the whole time I'm thinking, well, everyone's watching me because I haven't played in 2 months. The video's going back to whoever within the organization. They're like, all eyes are on me. I'm trying not to make a mistake. It was the dumbest thing ever. But for him, the purpose of a conditioning stint would actually be conditioning,
Right.
not to just like get someone games so you don't have to put them on waivers. So in his situation, it wouldn't be a magnifying glass where everyone's watching him. It wouldn't be trying to maximize 7 games in 14 days because that's the maximum you can possibly get out of the situation. It would be like, play a game, maybe have a day off, then wait a little bit, and then play a game. Like, I don't know. It would even just put him on like a PTO for a bit just to see how he does. And then if you like what you see, you can always sign him to an NHL deal.
I was going to tell you to tell Mr. Dryden and Mr. Button they forgot our boy Macklin Celebrini in their top 50 under 24. Then I read right at the end, NHL affiliated only.
Yes.
So we will look for
Yeah,
we will look for Vancouver to go 1 and 2 on that list
That's
next
true.
year.
Yeah.
With Bedard and Celebrini, if not a Canuck as well.
Quick Hunter Brustevich scouting report. You saw him last year. He's
Oh.
ripping it up right now.
Okay, so this is funny. So we're getting ready for the top prospects game, and I make a few phone calls, and obviously I have some friends in Kitchener still. I said, "Tell me about this guy." Yeah, you know what? He's he's pretty good. He doesn't do anything great, but he's just like a pretty good all-around player. Like that was the scouting report, and I got. I was like, all right, maybe at some point in his career, he's really going to have to like hone in on one thing that's really going to make him great. I don't know. I think he's figured it out, if you ask me, because the guy's on fire in the OHL. And his progression is probably further along than people thought from watching him last year. So credit to him because he's having a big year in the OHL. And he's probably not just that guy that's like, yeah, he does everything pretty good anymore. He's much better than that. So good for him.
And I think we'll see him at the World Juniors for Team USA, given the way things are going. Frankie, marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. We'll catch up next week.
All right, guys. Thanks. We'll talk.
This clip brought to you by Betway. Must be 19 plus to play. Please play responsibly.